Well, we've come around to a new year, and that means another project car. Another project on top of all of the other projects I already have. Last year, it was the land speed car. The year before that, the Tesla-powered Jag. What will the project this year be? Well, it will be one of several ideas I've had over the past year, all of which are a little inspiring and kind of stupid. This is Project Car Madness, and I know some of you are pointing out that it's not March yet, but this is not March Madness. This is Project Car Madness. March Madness is a registered trademark of the NCAA, and my attorney would like me to point out that even though we do have a bracket, this is a completely different thing. I have 16 sweet projects. Again, 16 sweet projects, not Sweet 16, which is also a registered trademark of the NCAA. These 16 projects will be divided into 8 pairs, which you will vote on. These are not organized into any particular order. Let's begin. This idea was partly inspired by Jim over at Send Cut Send. He built that insane Tesla-powered Honda Accord. This powertrain makes 536 horsepower and it's inside an old Honda that weighs half as much as a Tesla. This got me thinking, why not take that powertrain and stick it into something even lighter? What's the lightest you could go? I think the answer to that question is a Trike. Basically, you take the powertrain, the rear subframe with the motor and suspension, slap a Chevy Volt battery in front of it, and then weld up a frame for a seat in the front of a motorcycle. If power to weight is a good thing, this is the best thing. If safety is a good thing, then this is the worst possible idea. You can vote on this, but keep in mind, it will probably kill me. Up against the Trike that will definitely kill me is another Trike that will definitely kill me. This idea comes from the fact that Ducati has motorcycles with the rear swing arm coming off of the back of the engine, meaning you don't really need a frame to have a whole powertrain. You could make a cool custom bike with one of these guys, or you could make a cool custom Trike with 2 of these guys. Strap one on either side, weld up some sort of frame in the middle with a motorcycle wheel up front, and you're good to go. The big problem with this is that the 2 powertrains are not connected, and you should have about the same amount of power from both powertrains given the same throttle, but you might have a little bit more from one, or you might have a little bit more traction. This becomes a problem if you wheelie a little bit, which you're definitely going to do. If you hook up one side, not the other, you are going to spin to the side and go directly into oncoming traffic. You can sync up the transmissions with some linkage and probably a circuit that double checks the gear position on each engine, and you might be able to use some sort of traction control trigger wheel to compare the rotation of each wheel, but I don't know if that's going to be fast enough for internal combustion engines. You could link up the 2 sides at the wheel and add some sort of locking diff maybe. Electric motors would be better at syncing up. This perhaps would be better with 2 live wire rear ends, but then you wouldn't be able to use the name Double Duck, which is an excellent name. When thinking about the possible projects, it occurred to me that instead of buying one big project, I could spend my money on several smaller projects, and then for some reason I thought about buying 10 smart cars, and then for some reason the next thing that came up was building a giant smart car merry-go-round. Ferris wheel, actually. Just 10 cars all welded together in a circle. But you don't actually need 10. The approach and departure angle on these things is so good that you can make this happen with just 4. There are some challenges like spacing them out far enough to be able to see while you're driving, but it's doable. You could drive around and then just slam on the brakes and all of a sudden you're a Ferris wheel. The center of mass would of course be directly in the middle of all 4 of them, and based on my calculations, you would be able to wheelie super easily. So if you just mashed on the throttle, you could actually become a reverse Ferris wheel while driving forward. You'd probably need the electric smart for this because, you know, upside down. But funny thing is, they bricked their batteries really easily, so you can actually find these for super cheap. And you might be able to have 4 of them in a circle and then just put the battery for all 4 of them right in the middle. This brings up some interesting legal questions, like would you technically be able to drive around road legally with this? It does have all of the things you need to be road legal, 4 of them actually. But would you need different VIN numbers and insurance and license plates for all 4 of them, or could you just duplicate it? Because only one of them will ever be on the ground driving. Legal reasons notwithstanding, this is probably the worst idea on the list for a lot of reasons. But I'm putting it up against one of my favorite ideas on the list, an off-road Dodge Viper. Not a Safari Viper, but a full-on off-road Dodge Viper. Red RT10, the one I had on the poster on my wall when I was just a super small Matt, Gen 1 or 2 specifically. This seems out there, but it makes more sense than it might seem at first. See, the Viper is a total truck. It's body on frame, it shares a few parts with Dodge trucks and SUVs, it has massive amounts of torque, it gets horrendous fuel mileage. The brakes are way undersized for any track driving, the cooling system cannot deal with having the car at the limit for any amount of time. I know Dodge did the Viper Ram, and that's kind of cool, but they definitely should have done this from the factory. This car is absolutely bananas to drive, and to look at. The only way to make it more cartoony is to lift it up a foot and throw some off-road tires on it. I used to own one of these things and I loved it. It's a great car. It's also a terrible, terrible car. But is it a good truck? Also probably no. When you think cool cars, you probably don't think hybrids, but I actually think this would be awesome. Take an old Dodge Charger and put a turbine engine with a generator in it. This sounds expensive, and it probably is, but you can actually buy used turbine generators. They use them for auxiliary power units for airplanes and remote working locations. The idea is you take one of these and stick it under the hood. Then in the back, you throw an electric motor, probably like a Tesla rear drive unit. Put a small plug-in hybrid battery in there, and you have a fast EV that can also fill up at any gas station. Actually, depending on the turbine, you could probably run it on tequila if you wanted to. Ariel of Ariel Atom fame is working on a turbine-powered series hybrid supercar. I probably can't afford to do this, but I think if you got a major car company and started to mass produce these things, you could make it reasonably priced. For instance, a Dodge Charger. Why the Charger? Because Dodge should be doing this in production. They've got their Charger EV concept with the fake engine noise and some weird fake transmission shifting. This is stupid. Dodge is trying to make a cool EV, but they're going about it the wrong way. Imagine you pull up to the stoplights and next to you pulls up a silent Dodge Charger, and then you hear a turbine engine spooling up. This is super cool, and I don't want to do it, but Dodge definitely should. Up against the turbine Charger is the Hell & Country. I had this idea back when I owned a Town & Country. Chrysler has shoved their 700 plus horsepower engine into just about everything, but they never put it into a minivan, which is a crime. They really should have done this from the factory, just like the last two things I talked about. In fact, Chrysler should just put me in charge of product planning. I know minivans aren't cool, but the only reason they're not cool is because nobody has just owned it. Hybrid minivans? Meh. 700 horsepower minivan? Definitely. Tavares is supposed to be building a Hellcat Chrysler Pacifica, which I'm very much looking forward to. It's not technically a Hell & Country since it's a Pacifica, but it will have 1200 horsepower, which is, dare I say, too much? Or just right? I should probably leave this up to Freddie to figure out. The new Prius looks great and it has a decent amount of horsepower, but Toyota really needs a high-performance Prius, and I don't think they're going to do it, so maybe I should do it. I don't think this is actually too difficult. Remember that insane trike that was going to kill me? Not that one, the other one. That one. That uses plug-in hybrid batteries because plug-in hybrid batteries can discharge a lot of power. Now, I don't know the specs on the new plug-in Prius, but let's assume the battery is 400 volts and can discharge 15C, which is not unusual for a plug-in hybrid. With that, you should be able to power a Tesla Model 3 rear drive unit at full beans. Combine that with the front Prius internal combustion engine, and you have a 500 horsepower all-wheel drive Prius. Slap a wing on the back, take it to the track, and make the Honda Type R crowd second guess all their life choices. Toyota should really put me in charge of product planning. Ford could also benefit from the vivid imagination of Superfast Matt. See, I would love a Bronco Raptor, but here's the deal. It's too wide. Just stupid wide. I know it's made for blasting through sand washes, and I do love that part of off-roading, but I encounter a lot of narrow passages or rocks jutting out into the trail. I want a Bronco Raptor, but I really don't want the trade-offs for the width and the low-speed stuff, so why don't we just shove that 400 horsepower 3-liter into a Badlands? More power, more towing capacity, but it can still crawl through the narrows. Back before the Bronco Raptor came out, there were rumors that it was going to be sold under the Warthog name. Well, I think they should use the Warthog name for this vehicle. This is a no-brainer for Ford. This is a parts bin vehicle. You just take a bunch of stuff you already have and shove it together. The development cost for this thing would be less than the cost of one of them. Unfortunately, it would cost me a whole lot to make, so please don't vote for this one. Amphibious car or amphibious motorcycle. You decide. So assuming I don't buy 3 more smart cars and turn them into a giant smarty-go-round, I am looking for a reason to write off my smart car, and I think a really interesting way to do that would be to turn it into a giant RC car. Actually, the smallest giant RC car. Smart cars came with an electrically assisted steering rack, which might be enough to steer the car on its own. I could throw on a servo motor onto the throttle body, a giant fat linear actuator onto the brakes, and I'd have a full-size, fun-size RC car. Probably I'd want the brakes to fail on, so the actuator would need to pull them off, and I'd probably want another separate controller with a remote kill, but I think this is doable. I'm not sure about the legality of this, like if I'm sitting in the driver's seat with the controller, is that legal? And what if I'm in the passenger seat with the controller, but somebody else is in the driver's seat? This probably wouldn't cost me too much money unless there are tons of legal fees at the end of it, but it should be pretty simple, and I think it would be pretty interesting. Up against the RC Smart Car is another Trike, but this time we're going to take an existing Trike and drop an RV on top of it. Not the whole RV, just the trailer, one of those small tow-behind things, what the Brits would call a caravan. Those things are great, but you need a vehicle to tow them around. But what if you just attached the vehicle to the caravan? I know this is already a thing, but just imagine the simplest small trailer and something like a Honda Goldwing Trike, and you just use the axle of the Trike as the axle of the trailer. Now, there are two ways you can go about this. One is to put the rider inside the trailer. This would protect them from the elements, and it would look absolutely hilarious driving down the road, but the visibility would be bad, and you'd really eat into the inside space. I think you need to stretch the Trike out and then drop the trailer on the back. A Goldwing is probably not rated for this kind of weight, but I've seen some pretty fat people on Trikes, and Honda is very conservative with their designs, so it might work. Might not, but it might. Every time I talk about one of my motorcycle-powered cars, somebody asks me why I didn't put a Hayabusa in there. Well, for the S600 is because I wanted to keep it Honda, and for the land speed car, I wanted to keep it under 1 liter. But I would like to build something with a Hayabusa engine, and I think that thing should be a Ford Model T. We determined a few weeks ago that a Model T is just as good as a brand new Tesla, and I think it would be significantly better if it were powered by a 1.3 liter screaming at 10,000 RPM. This engine would be less than half the displacement of the original Model T engine, but over 8 times the horsepower, making this car the most dangerous vehicle on this list. But I do think there are some things you can do about this, like the wheels, for instance. They're wood, but you just need to CNC out some new ones out of aluminum and then paint them. Throw some motorcycle tires and brakes on there, and you're good to go. We can hide a steel roll cage inside the body, replacing the wood structure. The high center of mass might be a problem, so we'd have to do something with active suspension. This would get pretty involved. Basically, we're building a full custom race car, and if I'm building a full custom race car, I'd rather build an XK120 race car. I love the XK120, it's such a great looking car, and the overhead cam inline 6 is pretty cool, but I bet we can find one without an engine that's just begging for a turbocharged inline 6 with 500 horsepower. There are a few options available: the Supra, the M3 Competition, the S500. Some side pipes, a roll cage, maybe a wing, some obnoxious fender flares. This would be amazing. I wish I could afford to build it. Some of you have been screaming at your screen for the last 10 minutes that I should just finish the projects I've already started, and I have a lot. The Honda is mostly finished, but I've always wanted to make door cards and a carbon fiber roof for it. The Jag still needs some suspension, controls, and bodywork. The land speed car needs a whole body, and I'm not really looking forward to that. I have this giant scooter thing that's been 80% finished for like 3 years. I still need to tune the Grom. This is probably the most responsible thing to do, but also the least fun. But since I know I'm going to get tons of comments telling me that I should just finish the projects I already have, I'm going to put it on the list. Going up against this is, I don't know, a ham sandwich. So the madness begins. February Madness, I'm calling it. Click the link in the description to get to the Discord and cast your vote. I will also add another way to vote if you don't want to use Discord. In 24 hours, I will tally up the first round votes, and the second round voting will begin. 24 hours after that, we'll get down to the 4 finals. Not the Final Four. That is a registered trademark of the NCAA. The 4 finals. The winners from that will go on to the final round, and once you have decided the overall winner, it will be crowned the 2023 Collegiate Basketball Champion. No, sorry. It will be the next project that I build on this channel, as long as it's the project that I've already decided I'm going to build. So cast your vote, and keep in mind that I've already bought a Dodge Viper and off-road tires. It used to be that you had to impress people to get people to watch your show. Now you just have to impress the algorithm. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. All hail the algorithm.